Russian forces are continuing to focus efforts on the Kupiansk, Lyman, Bakhmut, Avdiivka and Marinka fronts, where 17 clashes occurred between Russian and Ukrainian forces over the course of the 11th of July. Source: General Staff of the Armed Forces of Ukraine on Facebook. Information is of 1800 on the 11th of July. Details: the situation remains unchanged on the Volyn and Polissia fronts. There is no evidence that Russia is forming offensive units on those fronts. Meanwhile, units of the Belarusian Armed Forces are carrying out operations in areas near the Belarusian-Ukrainian border. Russia continues to maintain its forces on the Severshchina and Slobozhenshchina fronts. Over the course of today, Russian forces conducted an airstrike in the vicinity of Volyn, Sumy Oblast, and deployed mortars and artillery to fire on more than 15 civilian settlements, including Karpovichy, Chernihiv Oblast, Romashko, Sumy Oblast, and Streleka, Veterinarn and Sotnitsky Kazakh, Kharkiv Oblast. Ukrainian forces are holding the line on the Kupiansk front. Krasny Persh, Kamyanka, Vorokna, Zapadna, Mashutivka and Kyslivka, Kharkiv Oblast, came under Russian mortar and artillery fire. On the Lyman front, Russian forces conducted unsuccessful offensive operations in the vicinity of Vesel, Donetsk Oblast, in Sheldnevsky and Bilohorivka, Luhansk Oblast, in Torsky, Verkhnekamiansk and Vesel, Donetsk Oblast. On the Bakhmut front, Ukraine's defense forces repelled Russian artillery and aircraft-supported assaults near Horohorivka and to the east of Orikovo-Vasilivka. Over 10 settlements, including Vashukivka, Bodanivka, Kromov, Chasev Yar and Ivanovsky, Donetsk Oblast, came under Russian fire. On the Avdiivka front, Ukraine's defense forces are continuing to prevent Russian forces from advancing in the vicinity of Avdiivka, Pervomaisk and Nevelsky. Russian forces conducted an airstrike near Avdiivka and shelled over 10 civilian settlements, including Avdiivka, Berdichi and Nevelsky, Donetsk Oblast. On the Marinka front, Ukrainian forces repelled all Russian assaults near Peremoha, Novomykhailivka and Marinka. The Russians shelled more than 10 civilian settlements, including Konstantinivka, Marinka and Yelizavetivka, Donetsk Oblast. On the Shakhtarsk front, Russian forces conducted unsuccessful offensive operations in the vicinity of Blahodatna. They carried out airstrikes near Odradna and Makarivka and shelled Vuhledar, Blahodatna, Vlika Novosilka, Vodian and Zolotaniva, Donetsk Oblast. Russian forces on the Zaporizhia and Kherson fronts are focusing their efforts on preventing Ukrainian forces from advancing. They conducted airstrikes in the vicinity of Mala Tokhmachka, Zaporizhia Oblast, and Zolota Balka, Kherson Oblast, and shelled over 25 civilian settlements, including Huliaipol, Huliaipilsky, Zaliznikny and Olhaivsky, Zaporizhia Oblast, Kozatsky, Elvov, Injunrin, Tokarivka and Kherson, Kherson Oblast, and Dniprovsky, Dmitrivka and Ivanivka, Mykolaiv Oblast. Meanwhile, Ukraine's defense forces continued to conduct offensive operations on the Melitopol and Berdyansk fronts, where they are consolidating the positions they had previously captured and conducting counter-battery operations. Over the course of the day, Ukrainian aircraft carried out 14 airstrikes on areas where Russian military personnel, weapons and equipment were concentrated and 3 on Russian air defense systems. Units of Ukraine's rocket forces and artillery struck 3 Russian command posts, 10 field artillery units, an anti-aircraft defense system, and an electronic warfare system. Ukrainian and Russian forces clashed 29 times on 5 fronts in past 24 hours, General Staff report. Ukraine's defense forces clashed with Russian occupation forces 29 times across 5 key fronts over the course of the 11th of July. Source: General Staff of the Armed Forces of Ukraine on Facebook. Information is of 6 o'clock on the 12th of July. Quote: Last night the Russian Federation once again deployed Iranian-made Shahed attack drones to attack Ukraine. Information about the aftermath of this terrorist attack is being confirmed. Russian occupation forces launched a total of 28 Shahed attack drones on Ukraine over the course of the past 24 hours. Ukraine's air defense destroyed 26 of these attack drones. Our defense forces also destroyed 5 reconnaissance drones. Over the course of the past day, Russian forces conducted 65 airstrikes and deployed multiple launch rocket systems (MLRS) in 71 further attacks on positions of Ukrainian troops and on civilian settlements. Several civilians sustained injuries and a number of infrastructure facilities were damaged in these attacks. There is a high ongoing threat of missile and airstrikes across all of Ukraine. Russia is continuing to focus its main efforts on the Kupiansk, Lyman, Bakhmut, Avdiivka and Marinka fronts, where heavy fighting continues. A total of 29 combat engagements occurred between Russian and Ukrainian forces on these fronts over the course of the day. Details. The situation remains unchanged on the Volyn and Polissia fronts. There is no evidence that Russia is forming offensive units on those fronts. Meanwhile, units of the Belarusian Armed Forces are carrying out operations in areas near the Belarusian-Ukrainian border. Russia continues to maintain its forces on the Severshina and Slobozhenshina fronts. Over the course of the past 24 hours, Russian forces conducted airstrikes in the vicinity of Volyn, Sumy Oblast, and Veteranarn, Kharkiv Oblast, and deployed mortars and artillery to fire on more than 20 civilian settlements, including Karpovichi and Mykolaievka, Chernihiv Oblast, Sopich and Romashko, Sumy Oblast, and Streleka, Veteranarn, Stoivka and Sotnitsky Kazaka, Kharkiv Oblast. Ukrainian forces are holding the line on the Kupiansk front. Russian aircraft struck areas in and around Podoli, Kucherivka and Kyslivka, Kharkiv Oblast. Krasny Persh, Kamyanka, Vorokna, Zapatna, Mashutivka and Kyslivka, Kharkiv Oblast, and Novoselivsky, Luhansk Oblast came under Russian mortar and artillery fire. On the Lyman front, Russian forces conducted unsuccessful offensive operations in the vicinity of Vesel, Donetsk Oblast, and carried out airstrikes in and around Bilohorivka and Nevsky, Luhansk Oblast. They also shelled Bilohorivka and Nevsky, Luhansk Oblast, and Rozdolivka, Torsky, Verkhnekamiansk and Vesel, Donetsk Oblast. On the Bakhmut front, Ukraine's defense forces repelled Russian artillery and air-supported assaults on Hurahorivka, Donetsk Oblast, and to the east of Orikovo-Vasilivka. Over 15 settlements, including Oleksandro Shultin, Vashukivka, Bodanivka, Kromu, Chasev Yar, Ivanovsky, and Pivdent Donetsk Oblast came under Russian fire. On the Avdiivka front, Ukrainian forces are continuing to prevent Russian forces from advancing in the vicinity of Avdiivka, Pervomaysk and Nevelsky. Russian forces conducted airstrikes near the settlement of New York and the city of Avdiivka and shelled more than 10 civilian settlements, including Avdiivka, Berdichi, Severn and Nevelsky, Donetsk Oblast. On the Marinka front, Ukrainian forces repelled all Russian attempts to advance near Pobeda, Novomykhailivka and Marinka. The Russians shelled more than 15 civilian settlements, including Kostantinivka, Marinka, Pobeda and Yelizavetivka, Donetsk Oblast. The General Staff of Ukraine's armed forces reported on July 12 that Russia had lost 235,530 troops in Ukraine since the beginning of its full-scale invasion on February 24 last year. This number includes 510 casualties Russian forces suffered just over the past day.